Charles Darwin was an explorer who traveled around the whole world and everywhere documented what he saw, be it beautiful or abhorrent. Although he was born into a wealthy family immersed in British imperialism, the most ethnocentric society on earth at that time, Darwin rejected the prevailing prejudice of his day and was one of the most egalitarian men of the 19th century. He often praised those he met from allegedly primitive cultures and frequently criticized the bigotry of his peers against subjugated peoples. He found every aspect of slavery abominable, and these facts are all so plain in his writings that it can hardly be doubted. After this period of adventure, he became an exemplary family man. Again, his devotion to his children, the grief of losing his beloved daughter, and his lifelong commitment and endearment to his wife are well-known and admirable qualities. Yet, because of his landmark discoveries, his current critics have committed as great a crime against him as painting a mustache on the Mona Lisa. Ray Banana Man Comfort and his idiot lackey Kirk Cameron have accused Darwin of being a racist and of having a disdain for women, and they've written 50 pages of these libelous lies into the anniversary copies of Darwin's On the Origin of Species. Cameron and Comfort have made a lucrative career out of dishonest misrepresentation, and their accusations are plainly false even on a cursory examination of Darwin's life and his works. Kirk Cameron, you lied about our liberties being God-given and of our being stripped of them. Each of those you listed were given by people, and people like me are defending your right to keep them. You also lied about whether American schoolchildren can pray in public or open a Bible in school. They still can, just as they always could. The same applies to the Koran and the Bhagavad Gita and Dianetics. It's just that government-funded educators cannot be permitted to force any one particular religion onto the sequestered children of families who, in this country, still have the right to hold to their own religions and religious denominations free from the inevitable oppression of any state-endorsed faith-based belief system. That's also why the Ten Commandments have never been permitted in our government's buildings, and in fact have never been displayed in any public building anywhere in the world. Because no one believes that sane men in the modern day need to observe the Feast of Weeks, or the Feast of Unleavened Bread in the month when the ear is on the corn. It's not really our highest priority that remember not to boil baby goats in their own mother's milk, or to be careful what kind of bread to offer with a blood sacrifice. You lied about science, too, and about there being many hoaxes to promote it. This is especially laughable since creationism relies entirely on frauds, falsehoods, and fakery, where science seeks out and exposes these by design. It is a simple matter to confirm that we have already found and keep on finding hundreds of unambiguously transitional species in the fossil record, even according to the strictest definition of that word, and that species-to-species macroevolution has been directly observed and documented dozens of times both in the lab and in naturally controlled conditions in the field. There is real-world market value in understanding these processes. I pointed this out to you before and have been assured that you've seen it, so you have no excuse. But that's not all you lied about. You also implied that certain historic scientists believed in miraculous creation even where that contradicts scientific explanations with practical application. Even when some of those scientists lived long before any understanding of evolution, and some of them were never successful scientists until they rejected religious dogma, or openly opposed religious authority, and disproved supernatural explanations, or even renounced belief in a deity as childish. You tried to deceive your audience into accepting a false dichotomy wherein one must either believe that God cannot use natural mechanisms or that one must reject natural science in order to believe in a creator. In so doing, you forgot the long list of modern scientists who believe that God created evolution. Notable scientists such as Reverend Bob Bacher, Keith Miller, Kenneth Miller, Lamoureux, Livingstone, Colling, Collins, Van Til, Arnhart, Wilcox, Finlay, Neild, Edwards, Polkinghorne, Jackie, and Dobzhansky. That's not to say that atheism isn't growing in the U.S. It is. But you're completely wrong about the reasons why. If you conduct a poll of 100, 1,000, or 100,000 American atheists, I bet you'll find that the majority of them were once religious, and that what drove most of them away from faith wasn't any revelation of science, but the intolerant hypocrisy, inconsistencies, contradictions, and fraudulent propaganda of creationists like yourself. Meaning that through your own blatantly dishonest conduct, you personally have already inspired more people to abandon their belief in God than any atheist or scientist ever will. You want students to hear both sides of the story, and so do I, because there's no such thing as a balanced account of magical creationism. It is a bias, by definition and admission. Every religion makes essentially the same claims as yours does, but there are many ways to change the heart of a nation. Indoctrination and deception are your ways, but education and enlightenment work better than anything else. Those for whom truth really matters will look to those telling the truth, and will hear your ilk no more. For example, despite your bigoted stereotyping of infidels, I myself do not believe in sin. But like most rationalists, I already love that which is right and just and good, more so than many of the most devoutly religious believers do, and that's why I won't lie the way you always have to.
On Thursday, November 19th, just a few days before the 150th anniversary of the book, 50,000 copies of this special publication will be freely given out at those top 50 universities. Now think of it. In one day, the gospel and a clear presentation of intelligent design will be placed into the hands of 50,000 of our future doctors, lawyers, and politicians. And we're working with Campus Crusade for Christ, Answers in Genesis, and the Alliance Defense Fund to get copies of Darwin's Origin of Species into the hands of this generation. And all we want to do is to present the opposing and correct view rather than being censored, which is exactly the case at present. These students aren't stupid. They should be given both sides of the argument and allowed to make up their own minds, right? We think that's healthy.
So you're trying to induct lawyers and politicians, because you already know you can't compete in any field of science. Because, as I've said before, and no one yet has even tried to contest me on this, there has never been a single verifiably accurate argument of evidence indicative of miraculous creation over biological evolution or any other avenue of actual science. Not one. Period. That's why you have to pretend to be censored. As I've said before, it amazes me how anyone can be so consistently proven to be absolutely wrong about absolutely everything 100% of the time for such a long time and still believe theirs is the absolute truth. But of course, yours is not the correct view. It is depraved and unhinged. For example, Darwin wrote against the favoritism of Caucasian invaders and opposed the genocide of indigenous natives. Despite all your allegations, not one aspect of Darwin's philosophy was shared by Adolf Hitler. Now, in your 50 pages of mined quotations, you have a couple of comments where Hitler discusses the evolution of contemporary politics. You found one guy who never knew Hitler, and apparently never read Hitler either, who obviously didn't know any better and gave no evidence for his allegations. And of course you have all of Hitler's other comments, wherein he loudly and proudly declared himself to be a creationist, and never implied otherwise in any speech, publication, or private discussion we have on record. Now, while he obviously saw theocracy as the greatest threat to his dominant ambition, his anti-Semitism was clearly inspired and driven by Christian teachers and his religious upbringing. Darwin's and Hitler's philosophies could not be any more at odds. Ray Comfort, you said there's an undeniable connection between Darwin and Hitler? Well, you're wrong again, sir. I deny it. Better than that, I'll prove the point. Stalin, Mao, and Hitler all rejected Darwin's concepts as a matter of public record, but none were more against Darwin than Hitler. Just like any other creationist today, Hitler argued that evolution could only occur within definite limits, and then only to subtle variants within their kind. He said new diversity is limited to rare and inviable hybrids between those kinds, and he said that the emergence of new species is impossible. And of course, no Darwinist would ever say any of these things. But creationists commonly say all of them. Hitler even declared belief in evolution to be a damnable sin against his divine creator. Now, whether Nazis accepted science or not is irrelevant, in that evolution would still be an inescapable fact of population genetics, easily demonstrated even in agriculture. In the same way, evil people believe in atoms, too, but that doesn't make atomic theory evil. Now, that's not the point here. The point, Ray, is that you're a liar, and now you're a vandal, too. So let me prove it, Ray. Along with the other challenges I've already levied that you're too cowardly to accept, add this. I defy you to find any statement Hitler ever made to imply that he had any understanding of Darwinian theory and that he had any preference for evolution over divine and miraculous creation, because it appears that Hitler never even acknowledged Darwin other than to reject his theory outright, and I'm tired of hearing creationists lying about this. Hitler was definitely on your side of the fence, not mine, and it's time to call you out on that.